Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tin Man Collections. And today, I'll be reading a chapter out of the Ghost of the Southern Mountains in Appalachia book again. And this chapter is called The Shenandoah Stage. It takes place in New Market, Virginia. So, here we go. Two young Confederate officers sat eating together in the dining room of the hotel in New Market, Virginia on the evening of May 24th, 1862. General Stonewall Jackson, who would become Lee's right arm, had just won his first important battle the day before at Front Royal. Was there any way for the Union to stop him now? Perhaps, and perhaps not. The officers had seen the man seated at the bar looking at them and decided he must be a Confederate sympathizer. Judging by his lack of a pistol, his important suit, and well-manicured hands, he could be a writer or a minister visiting the New Market area. Perhaps en route to Richmond, Fleming raised a gray-clad arm, gesturing for him to join them, and the stranger responded eagerly. Slim and immaculate groomed, the dark-haired young man sat down, introducing himself as John Sharp. By his description, he sounds like a Sharp. Just kidding. And as he spoke, there were traces of a British accent. After a few minutes of evaluating him, both officers had decided that he was British and sympathetic to the Southern cause. Lieutenant Henry Fleming voiced his gratitude for the infield rifles that has been getting through the blockade, and the gentleman smiled and nodded. Why is England so slow to recognize the Confederacy formally? Mr. Fleming, I don't know, but I understand it will not be long before an ambassador will be sent to Richmond. I wonder who that could be. Of course, England needs our cotton if the textile mills are to keep running, said Lieutenant McRae. Isn't that so? My dear friend, I can assure you that even now important decisions are being made in England. Important decisions have been made here, and it's time they did something to recognize us. And Stuart McRae, who was a South Carolinian, Columbia is such a beautiful city. I greatly enjoyed my recent stay there, said John Sharp. Changing the subject, his accent was pleasant to ears of McRae, whose hopes for education abroad had been postponed because of the war. You have just come from Columbia, then? Indeed, I have. Is it possible I met your sister at a musical there? No, surely not. That would be too much of a coincidence. I think this girl's name was Lietta. Of course, I recall it because this Lietta exemplified everything I had imagined about Southern womanhood. I can't believe it. You met my dear sister. And how was she? She was delightful. And there's a picture of the stagecoach. I don't know when I have a letter from her, but the mail doesn't keep up with General Jackson, you know. They say his men worship him now. He takes care of them. With General Banks' storehouses of supplies, Jackson manages to see that we get more than our fair share, said Fleming with a smile. Everyone joked about the way Jackson kept capturing the Union General's supplies, and then even called Banks Jackson's commissionary. You gentlemen will be resting here in New Market for a week or so now, won't you? Said Sharp. Fleming stiffened even so slightly, and the glass of wine on the way to his lips stopped in midair. Why do you ask, sir? Just an offhand remark. I imagine the men jolly well need it, for they have been on the march a great deal, and I would think they must be tired. What do you say, McRae? Well, sometimes the men say he is marching them to death to no good end. Well, I know back in them days they were kind of like, training them hard, so I know what they're coming from. But I know the general, when he gets started, Winchester is only a few miles up the... Hush, Stuart. We don't know what the general's got in his mind. No one does, said Lieutenant Fleming. At that moment, a courier approached the two Confederate officers and told them they were to join their regiment at once. We're marching, asked McRae, and the courier nodded. Where is the good fellow who sat with you, gentlemen? Asked one of the bartenders as they paid the bill. The Britisher? He is a Britisher. He went to Harvard. Harvard? Yes, my brother. Went there and picked up the accent. I knew I heard it before. I asked him. He finally admitted, but said he had always been a Southern sympathizer. Fleming shook his head and grasped McRae by the arm. Did you hear that? Or, excuse me, like that. Certainly, but I know a Southern sympathizer when I meet one. They passed Sharp, who was part of a group outside the hotel, without noticing him. The Valley stage has just pulled up. The passengers and driver were entering the hotel for the evening meal. The stage was a familiar sight on the road to Winchester, though Sharp, and then an idea came to him as he stood there alone for a moment in the dusk. They thought was at once so practical and opportune that he leapt up into the driver's seat and seized the reins. In the interval since the vehicle has arrived, the street in front of the New Market Hotel had emptied and seemed there was no one to see his deed. The stage was off to a mud-splattering, clattering start. When he reached the edge of town, Sharp cracked his whip to urge the horses on. And so, with this stage, wrote the fate of General Banks at Winchester and Stonewall Jackson's army on the way to attack. Back in New Market, the two young Confederate officers were saddling their horses in the stable next to the hotel building. There were no reason to hurry because it takes an army of 17,000 men more than a few minutes to get started. Is that how long? 17,000 men. Good Lord, man. They had heard the clatter of the stage as it left and now looked up amazed to see the driver come running into the stable shouting, "Help! Someone has stolen my stage!" They cantered around to the front of the hotel and Fleming saw the man he had talked to at the bar. "Where is our Harvard man?" He called out and the fellow shook his head and replied, "He rushed off without paying his bill. Let's go, Stuart. Spur your horse." "What do you mean?" "We got a long road ahead of us. Our friend is in the hotel, has taken off in the Valley stage. He was a spy and we gave away Jackson's plan." "Good Lord." "Yeah, now you guys are doomed, aren't you?" "We got to stop him before he reaches the Union lines and warns Banks," said McRae. And so the Great Valley Chase started there in the last twilight of May 24th, 1862. Ahead, the stagecoach pulled by four slightly worn horses, followed by two young Confederates on fresh mounts. The stage probably had a 2-mile lead as they left New Market. By the officers were Jackson's men, and they were more than good foot cavalry, as they sometimes derisively called themselves. They rode well too. By the time they passed the crossroads at Mount Jackson, the lead had narrowed to a half-mile. The stagecoach horses were tiring, not used to such wild pace. At Edinburgh at midnight, the Confederate officers could see the stage in the moonlight only a few hundred yards in front of them, and at the same time they saw the stage. Sharp saw his two pursuers. They would catch him before he could reach help unless he used his Navy revolver. He hated to do that. Odd that it had been McRae's sister he met, and for one of the few times in his life he was much taken with a woman. What irony to have shoot the girl's brother. He cursed to himself. He wished now he had never followed his intuition and asked McRae her name back at the hotel. The smell of rain had been in the air earlier at Mount Jackson, and now it had started. Cool drops taped his face as the stage swept under the storm. What a spectacle the lightning was! He might not have to do anything. He thought most horsemen were afraid of lightning, and rightfully so, or rightfully so. Of course, it could strike the stage, but caught up in the excitement of the chase, he laughed aloud, for he loved danger. Man, that guy was excited about everything. Anyway, would the devil harm his own, or if God was really on the Union side, he was safe either way. But his pursuers, now only a short distance behind him, were undiscouraged by the sharp cracks of lightning, and so Sharp turned on the seat and took aim. He knew what he had to do, and he would not miss. He could see the dark shapes of the two horsemen, and he did not know which was McGree and which was Fleming in the blackness. And then he had his moment of indecision. He had shared a meal with these two men and liked them both, so they were no longer strangers, but was his alternative. If you don't know which one of them are, shoot one of them in the shoulder and see if they scream like one of the guys. You know. But then I would have had a lantern just to make sure. But anyway, if he stopped, he would become their prisoner and very likely be hanged. He could not do that. Sharp had learned marksmanship well, and he waited for them to ride even closer before he slightly slid down the barrel. Then he pulled the trigger. As he did so, a blast engulfed the stage, but it came not from the pistol, but from the clouds. Lightning struck right on the metal barrel just as the pistol was about to fire, engulfing the man and the stage, and the thunder came at the same second as it often does. When lightning hits close by, the two Confederates reined their horses to a stop. Momentarily blinded by the flash, they came thunder crashing around them and rumbling off to the south. Neither man was sure what had happened until they saw the charred outlines of the stage. They were alone in the darkness with a dead spy who had tried to kill them. Their nostrils inhaling the strong smell of horses wet from a mixture of sweat and spring rain, the storm subsiding, and Jackson's surprise attack building up somewhere out in the night. I feel bad for the guy that got burnt. They rejoined their regiment, and for many reasons, the entire episode was one they were never cared to talk about. On the next day, General Stonewall Jackson attacked the Federal line at Winchester and broke it, and General Banks' men fled desperately toward the Potomac. His army escaped destruction, but it was a panic-stricken retreat, little better than a rout. The people of Winchester looked upon the Confederate troops as saviors, giving them an ecstatic welcome, almost demented with joy. Now Jackson's men knew what they had been marching for, and bitterness was replaced by elation over their dazzling triumph. Confidence in him and themselves soared, and the word of Jackson's feat spread as General Banks' star plummeted. The man who had stolen the stage, John Sharp, was no Britisher, but in reality a second lieutenant in the Union cavalry and the son of the wealthy Boston shipowner. His schooling had been at Harvard, and his accent was deceptive. At Banks' request, Lieutenant Sharp had volunteered to spy for the Union and was traveling up and down the valley collecting information on the movements of Stonewall Jackson's men. A year later, Leland Hawes, a scout for Colonel Mosby, saw what he thought was an old valley stagecoach flying along at top speed, the horse's hoofs scarcely touching the ground. Its driver was glancing behind him as he urged his horses on. The thunder rolled across the valley, and clouds obscured the face of the moon. When they vanished, Hawes looked again, but this time he saw nothing, and for many years the stage was reported here and there between Newmarket and Winchester. Only when the moon is full, only when rain is in the air, and only when clouds drift over the face of the moon, causing dark shadows, is the stage seen again in our day as it travels along Highway 11, once called the Valley Pike. Its fading red paint and splattered with mud, and the driver's face is deadly pale and streaked by smoke. His bony blackened hands grip the reins so tightly as the stagecoach bounces over the ruts and stones of the old road. But it's those 4 white horses that take your breath away to watch. In full gallop, they strain at the creaking leather harness. Manes flowing, hoofs flying. Why the hurry? Where are they going? I would definitely be scared to see a ghost stagecoach come by with horses just looking pale, white and everything. Even a dead man driving a horse, drawn carriage. Ooh. I can tell you where they're going. He still thinks he's still got to deliver that message, but he don't know he's dead. Probably. But anyway, the stage is heading to Winchester more than 100 years late. Both driver and team captives of another dimension and time, they are destined to ride forever but never to arrive. How many visions like Sharp and the Valley Stagecoach are out there for us to encounter one of these nights on some place or some remote mountain road or lonely deserted place. Like debris from this world left in space that will go whirling about forever. Are we experiencing something left long ago on our planet from other lives, the eerie debris of the spirit world? I would say yes to that. All right. That's going to be it for this book for a while. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those post notifications, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.